Hi again, everybody. This video is sponsored by contribution from Sherry, and here's what she has to say. Dear Ollie, my name is Sherry, and I have made a PayPal contribution. I wish so much that it could be more, but by the end of this letter, you will understand why money is so tight. Before I get into my story, I want to thank you for what you are doing. I am so thankful every day that I stumbled across your channel while trying to find information on narcissistic abuse. What you are doing is extremely important. You give validation to victims who, like myself, have probably been blown off by people who either choose to believe the narc or who just don't care or just don't get it and will look at you with a blank look like you have two heads or something when you try to explain to them what has been done to you. Please bear with me because you will understand why I had to turn to you by the time you get to the end of this letter. I have good reason to believe that my life and the life of my husband, 3 adult kids, son-in-law, and grandkids could be in danger. I am 53 years old. I was abused, manipulated, used, and taken advantage of by my narc mother, who I will refer to as Thing 1 because it makes me physically gag to use the word mom or mother. An equally twisted younger brother, Thing 2. For 4 decades before, she not only let her mask slip, but she pretty much ripped it off and gleefully mocked me when she finally discarded me 3 years ago. If I tried to tell you the entire story, it would fill a book, so I will try to stick to the most important facts. My life seemed pretty normal when I was very little, up until I was 4 years old when my maternal grandmother, who we lived with, died, and Thing 2 was born 1 year later. Thing 1 and my dad had both been married before, and I had an older half-brother who lived with us, and an older half-sister from my dad who lived with her mother. My life seemed pretty normal. I felt loved by my grandmother, my parents, and my older brother, who was 12 years older and was more like a second dad to me because my dad worked 2 jobs to support us all for several years, so he was home more than my dad was. Looking back over my life now, I can pretty much see when I became Thing 1's enemy. I was maybe 5 years old, Dad was at work, and Thing 1 had gone to either a neighbor's house to get cigarettes at the little neighborhood grocery, leaving me alone with Thing 2, who was just a baby in the playpen. The phone rang and I answered it, and this lady was calling me honey and sweetie and asking all kinds of questions about my dad, where he worked, etc. I was just a little child, and so I innocently answered all of her questions. I now know it was my half-sister's mother trying to get info on my dad because he apparently was not paying his court-ordered child support. And she used the info she got from me, a trusting 5-year-old child, to have his paychecks garnished. This is when the entire dynamic of my family changed. I can remember being in the backseat of our car at some point after that, and my dad referring to me as a big-mouth idiot to Thing 1. Something that I could not understand and that tore my 5-year-old heart, because prior to that, my dad had always been kind and loving to me. The next things that happened included my dad turning into an angry, physically abusive person toward me and my older brother, who ran away from home shortly after. My dad seeing a lawyer to try to find out where my sister and her mother were because they kept moving around the state and he wanted visitation if he had to pay child support. I now understand that he was being manipulated by Thing 1 into all of this. She made it very clear to me over my lifetime how bitter she was that she never received a penny of child support from my older brother. And she was royally pissed that my dad ended up paying child support right up until my sister turned 18. Before I go further, let me explain that when Thing 2 was born in 1968, he and Thing 1 both contracted the Hong Kong flu when he was just a couple weeks old. He was extremely ill and ended up being hospitalized for some time, and I could see now that this, in addition to the child support issue, is how he became the golden child and why he was treated like some kind of little prince. Man, you hit the nail on the head with the son husband thing, which you will see later, who is protected from our father's abuse and given anything and everything he has ever asked her for or wanted. Thing one also started telling me that she always wanted a son for my dad first, leaving me to feel my entire life that I am just a mistake, that I should have never have happened, and I would not have been born had thing two been born before me. She started sending me to Sunday school and church with neighbors, and also alone, even though no one in my family attended church. According to her, all Christians are liars, hypocrites, and child molesters. The child molester thing coming from her story that her uncle, my deceased grandfather's brother, who was a minister, tried molesting her, and that he had molested his own daughters. It sounded like some dirty family secret. She was told by my grandmother never to tell my grandfather because he would kill him if he knew. By the time I started kindergarten, she terrorized me so badly with stories like this. She had me believing that kidnappers and child molesters were waiting behind every bush and in every public place to kill me. And that if anything happened to me, that it would be my own fault because I had been warned. It was a real mind fuck to be gaslighted by the age of 6 into believing that the whole world was scary and evil, and the only safe place for me was at home with family who was abusing me. She was also doing some skeevy, sketchy stuff that bordered on sexual abuse involving me. Thing two, which he would have been too young to remember. And possibly one little girl she was doing in-home daycare in the late 60s and very early 70s. Though I have no real proof, so I'm not going down this road other than to point out, like you said in another video, many narcs will do this shit. Of course, by this time, she was also physically abusive to me, and every bad thing that happened in the family was already being twisted into something that she could blame on me. The church thing backfired on her, though. I loved it and found it to be a welcoming refuge among kind, good people. If it wasn't for my faith and in the existence of God and my husband, kids, and grandkids, I know that I would never have been able to keep going. But when I was little, she tried the good old honor thy father and thy mother bit, along with other scripture, to control me and to keep me in line, just like many other narcs have done to their victims, and it unfortunately worked for the better part of my life. Now on to the next 4 decades. Understand that I am looking at my life in hindsight now, clearly seeing things now for what they actually were. It's amazing how all of the pieces of the puzzle finally fit together now and make sense when you are finally no contact and away from the abuse, gaslighting, manipulating, and lies. Thing one was verbally and physically abusive toward me for the rest of my childhood, holding me down on the kitchen table and choking me at one point when I was about 12. Before that, she liked whacking me with a hairbrush, a wooden panel, and a hand mirror that she thought was hilarious that it broke the last time she hit me with it. Well, she laughed when I get blamed for having a hard head or a hard back or a hard ass for breaking wooden spoons. My father was hateful towards me and physically and verbally abusive for years. He hit me for the last time when I was maybe 10. By this time, thing two, even though he was only preschool, kindergarten age, pretty much understood that he could do whatever he wanted and thing one would protect him. He saw me and blamed me for everything that happened in my family. He saw me hit by my dad and thing one. He's already conditioned to hate me. I was lying on the couch one afternoon at the age of 10 or 11, and thing two kept coming over and hitting me on the top of my head. Neither my dad, not thing one, said a word to him or told him to stop it, even though I was clearly upset. I finally got up off the couch and my dad yelled at me, "Don't you dare touch him," being a kid and doing what a kid will do. I touched him. I kind of pushed his shoulder. My dad was on me like white on white rice. My dad was 5'11", maybe 160 pounds, and in good physical shape from years of doing physical labor. I was this tiny 10 or 11-year-old girl, half his size and weight. He grabbed me, threw me against the living room wall, and proceeded to hit me in the back over and over again. I was hysterical in pain and looked over at my mother to see her sitting in her chair, Thing 2 cradled in her lap, being protected. All she did was say to my dad in a non-caring voice, "Dear, stop it." No anger, no fear, nothing. I was able to get away from him and run to the bedroom that I shared with Thing 2. I was sobbing in hysterics from the beating. I pulled up my shirt and looked at my back, and it was covered in red marks from him hitting me with his bare hands. He was yelling and ranting from the living room. I screamed that I was going to call the police. And though he threatened me, I think he realized he had gone way too far, because he never laid a hand on me after that, though the verbal abuse continued off and on until I left home at the age of 16. Man, those red marks. I haven't thought of that in years. Those red marks when you pull your shirt up and your face and the handprints and the lunatic yelling still. Because even after the beating stops, the yelling doesn't. The ranting doesn't. Way too familiar. I know now in hindsight how badly my dad was being manipulated by Thing 1. He was not allowed to have friends of his own. All their friends were either her friends or couples who had kids that our own families would get together from time to time for picnics, fishing, etc. Looking back, I now see that the only reason Thing 1 was friendly with these people was she had a free babysitter to push Thing 2 and I on and off on. Off on, but she would rarely ever, if ever, return the favor and watch their kids. She also badmouthed all these people behind their backs and always made sure that my dad paid later at home with no witnesses for having any fun out at these get-togethers with other families. My dad's family was only welcomed in our home if Thing 1 thought she could manipulate them and get something from them. Now for the other stuff before I left home. Thing 1 was always a fat slob in spite of the rest of us in the house being normal weight. I now realize that she must have been stuffing her fat face when she was home alone and no one was there to see her eating. It's the only explanation. As kids, we weren't allowed pop, candy, except during holidays like Halloween, or to eat anything meant for my dad's lunchbox. She controlled what groceries were bought and controlled when and what we ate. I was never allowed a glass of water because she bitched that if she didn't want me to dirty a drinking glass. So I'd go in the bathroom and put my mouth under the sink faucet to get a drink. When she figured out what I was doing, I caught hell for running water because it was expensive. We never had extended family to spend holidays with like my friends and their families did, and it made me very sad. I now realize that Thing 1's siblings, a sister and brother who lived in other states, and a brother who lived in our town, knew what she was and knew to keep their distance. She would talk shit nonstop about them and her cousin Marguerite and Marguerite's daughter Barbara, who also lived locally. Marguerite and Barbara, as well as Thing 1's siblings, had done very well educationally and financially for themselves in life. Thing 1 was insanely jealous of this fact, and as she herself had lots of problems in school, held back several times because of learning problems, so that she ended up being in 8th grade at the age of 15 to 16, When she finally dropped out and almost immediately got pregnant with my older brother and became a 16-year-old girl forced to marry the older guy who got her pregnant. The marriage ended in divorce a short time later, and she met and married my dad. But back to the fact that she would insinuate herself into Marguerite and Barbara's life at every opportunity, seeking financial gain and any dirt she might possibly get from them to use to badmouth them behind their backs. She believed that she was getting an inheritance when Marguerite died, and in the end, she received nothing but some old crappy stoneware dishes. Back to myself and thing two, as part of the abuse that I suffered, I was forced to wear garage sale clothes and shit from Goodwill. Totally inappropriate for a young girl. I know you're ugly, but being a girl in 6th grade in 1975 and being forced to wear some used old lady navy blue polyester pantsuit to school was a nightmare. She even made me get my beautiful curly shoulder-length blonde hair cut short, and it looked like shit. She had the ugliest, thinnest dark hair, and I guess she wanted me to have ugly hair too. As she got older, she lost most of her hair. So now I know she hated me for having thick, pretty hair. As I hit puberty, I really blossomed. Cute figure that I was always complimented on, and which my mother would insult and torment me about, calling me names. Her favorite thing to call me a big ox when I grew taller than her, even though I was very slender. She even took my stretchy halter top, one thing she actually bought me new, on sale at Kmart. Of course it was so cheap, and stretched it over her fat 200-pound 5'4" body and ruined it. Stretched it out so bad I was never able to wear it again. There's a picture of her, thing two, and I on vacation that my dad took. I wish I had it, but she has it. And in the photo, she is wearing my halter top and a pair of polyester shorts with her big, fat, pasty gut hanging out of her thin, greasy hair in a ponytail. Disgusting photo. But my point is, even when I got something new, she would ruin it. She would ruin it for me. Her older brother's wife would give her my cousin Patty's hand-me-down clothes. Not that I minded this. They had money, and the clothes were beautiful name brand stuff from the best local stores. My Aunt Pat would have me joyfully trying on these clothes at her house to make sure they fit. As soon as we got home, thing one would give them away to friends with my daughter's age and size, and I would never get to wear them. Meanwhile, thing two was given everything brand new. Thing one's excuse for buying me cheap used shit or not sending money on me at all was they couldn't afford it. But there was plenty of money for thing two to have $75 Nikes while I had to wear $5 Kmart tracks. And she bitched about spending even that on new pair of shoes for me. He got all new clothes every year at the start of school, all the best toys that were in at the time. Taekwondo lessons, Cub Scouts. He wanted it, he got it. He has never bought a car with his own money, as thing one has always bought them for him and given him money anytime he asked. All I got were excuses. If I had to ask her for money, yep, my dad made most of the money and she controlled every penny. He never wrote a check or had anything to do with their finances all during their marriage. She controlled it all. I know this is going so much longer than I wanted, but please bear with me, because when you get to the end, you will know why I finally wrote to you and made a contribution, because I don't know what else to do or who to turn to. By this time, thing two was growing up, seeing all this and seeing what he could get away with. By the time he was 11 and 12 and taking Taekwondo, he was just about my size and figured out that he could physically abuse me by that time and no one would stop him. I even got chased through my house by him wielding a butcher knife, and I had to lock myself in the bathroom to keep him from stabbing me. He stabbed the door instead, and to this day that gouge remains in the bathroom door as far as I know. My dad and Thing One had stopped the physical abuse on me by this point. Our life was very private, so many secrets, and I am pretty sure they were afraid that I was going to tell people what was going on. Yep, you guessed it, I'm the truth teller, so I am the most hated one. Thing Two would wait until Thing One and my dad were at work and there were no witnesses. Wonder where he learned that from. Ha ha. To karate kick me. I was so desperate to get out of there that I dropped out of school and got involved with a 20-year-old guy when I was 16 and moved out and into an apartment with him. I married him at 18 and gave birth to my daughter at 19. But I divorced him shortly after because he was abusive to me and I did not want my daughter growing up thinking that was acceptable or normal. The first time I ever saw my dad cry was the day that I moved out. After the years of abuse and being told to get out if I didn't like living there, I was truly bewildered why I even cared. Thing One, on the other hand, shoved a $20 bill in my hand and was all smiles. The bitch. By the time I was 18, married and pregnant, my dad and I mended fences. We became close and ended up having a very good, loving relationship. He was an amazing grandfather and was just like the kind of loving dad he had been to me before Thing Two was born. Thing Two, on the other hand, had started getting in trouble with the law and smoking pot with his friends. Every time he got into trouble, Thing One would bail him out of jail, paying fines, making restitution, but most of all blaming Thing Two's friends and never once holding him accountable for his actions. This continues to this day. She's good at paying lawyers to do shady shit for herself and him, which you will see shortly. He has a criminal record, some public records, some not. Some too old to research now. He attempted to run down his ex-girlfriend Valerie with his car, and Thing One must have had to hire a damn good lawyer because he never spent any time in jail. His girlfriend took him back and they had another kid together. I will provide you links with proof at the end of this letter. Well, I can guarantee you with that, the lawyer didn't get her to take him back. Her own abuse did, and his own manipulation did. That has less to do. I think she probably just stopped cooperating and changed her story, and that's how those things usually end up happening. Now, I'm no angel. I don't pretend to be, but I've never committed any crimes or abused anyone, and the only legal trouble I have been in was a speeding ticket almost 30 years ago and filing bankruptcy. Thing Two also moved out at 16 and moved in with some older gay man a couple hours away from here. To be clear, I am not homophobic, just pointing out that Thing Two is either closeted homosexual or he's either using this guy for whatever he could get out of him. The guy was always buying him expensive gifts and stuff, which just didn't sound right for them being roommates, and Thing Two being engaged to a young woman at this point. He ended up breaking up with her and moving back in with Thing One and our dad. He showed up with a nasty bruise and some injuries and claimed that the gay roommate had done it to him because he was jealous of the fiance. To this day, I have no idea if this was true, as he has remained friends with Dave and all the while shit-talking him behind the back, claiming Dave to be a child molester, a thief, etc., etc. Again, no proof any of that is true, but I'm sure Dave does not know about this garbage because he is still friends and has taken Thing One and Thing Two slanders and lies about me and my family as gospel. I will prove proof of that later as well. Your brother's definitely gay. And what do you think the violence towards you is about? And as far as Dave goes, I guarantee you Dave just loves drama. Dave loves drama. He wouldn't care either way. Whether he knew it or not, it wouldn't matter to him. He'd be there for the drama. But it's the same recurring theme that every narc does: lie, steal, cheat, abuse, and play victim, and abuse their victims of doing the things they are actually guilty of. He stole my debit card years ago when we were all living in the same house after my divorce and after his breakup with his fiance. Money was always missing from my purse. If thing two was not in the house, thing one and my dad would go on and on about stuff missing from the house, and thing two stealing silver certificates and Kennedy half dollars and silver dollars that they had been collecting for years, bitching about all the money they had loaned him over the years and how he never paid any of it back, bitching about how he acted and things he did and how he lived his life. But to my knowledge, they never once confronted him about it. I need to note here that my husband and I borrowed money from thing one and my dad over the years, but we always paid them back even if it took a while. And we were always there to help them anytime with anything they needed. He then moved out to live with a succession of girlfriends and be married and divorced twice, having a son with his first wife, a son and a daughter with a girlfriend after that, then marrying a third time, but they did not have children together, though she had 2 daughters from a previous marriage. In the meantime, I met my now husband at 27 years and had 2 sons with him. Thing 2 was pretty much missing in action from our lives for almost 20 years, unless he needed money or a lawyer or bailed out of jail or someone to come to a hospital for one of his many half-assed attempted suicides. During the time he was sponging off of whatever woman he was with while he rarely worked, and if he did have a job, it never lasted long, and he was pretty much MIA from the family, rarely having any contact with any of us or coming to family get-togethers, even though he had been invited, always having the excuse that he didn't like to be around people. My husband, kids, and I were very close to thing one and my dad, or so I believed at the time. For more than 20 years, we did everything with thing one and my dad. Holidays, birthdays, kids' achievements, talking on the phone, every day, seeing them at least once a week. Running errands for them, going with them to the doctor, mowing their yard, and doing all the other things that thing one asked me to do for them. The only friction during those 20 years was when thing two would show up and thing one would take his side and I would get angry and she would pull the silent treatment punishment on me. I would get blamed and I would be the one crawling back and apologizing to her. Having been gaslighted into believing I was wrong and it was my fault. I was so desperate for thing one's love that I allowed her to manipulate me into doing things that I now regret, like writing a letter of support to the court for thing one and his second wife to get custody of his kids from his ex-girlfriend. I thought I was doing the right thing. His ex-girlfriend was a nutcase and the kids were showing every sign of being physically abused, having serious injuries that no normal kid would get no matter what kind of roughhousing they might be doing while playing. Then his wife Brandy was a good person. And while the kids were living with thing two and Brandy, she did an excellent job of taking care of them. It was the first time the kids had any stability in their lives ever. So when I was suckered into writing the letter for him to get custody, it was less about him and more about Brandy being a good parent to them. The kids ended up going back to their mother, Valerie, though, and all during this time I was hearing stories about thing two abusing Brandy. This in addition to all the abuse I knew about him doing to all the other women he had been involved with. The cops were called one night, and thing one and my dad had to drive almost 2 hours in the dark because thing two was about to be arrested for tying knives onto sticks and threatening to stab Brandy and her daughters to death. I have no idea what happened with that, but my guess is thing two and my dad showed up and talked him down and talked Brandy into not calling the police. it was also about this time that he got a lawyer and started trying to get Social Security disability, which he eventually did get, I am told, though I have no proof, was because he was diagnosed bipolar with a degenerative spine disease, which would render him wheelchair bound in the future. More bullshit, and I will get into that too. So he got his disability by using one of those shifty lawyers that specialize in getting disability for anyone, whether they are truly disabled or not. And I do not believe it was based on his work record, because you need to work a certain amount of time during a certain time period, then be unable to do work at all for a year to qualify for regular disability. The only thing he could have qualified for was SSDI, which is based more on your financial assets and the financial assets of your spouse, as well as your physical disability. There is too an unemployment standard that you have to meet. It's more of a Social Security, poor people with little to no work history with no financial assets, which is important for you to know, which is because of what's coming next. Thing One's wife, Brandy, had enough after he blew through his lump sum disability payment. Then, in a rage, for whatever reason, proceeded to trash and destroy everything he had blown it on, mainly a big screen TV, video consoles, you get the picture. She finally had enough and threw his ass out of the house in 2010. Where did he go? He moved in with Thing One and my dad. This is where the nightmare of the past 5 years really gets bad. Thing Two proceeded to treat our parents' home like a freaking hotel, with them being the staff to cater to him. He came and went as he pleased, not contributing financially or doing a single thing to help out around the house. Smoking pot in front of my dad, as if daring my dad to try to stop him. My husband Brad and I were still mowing, still coming over to remove snow, still running errands for them, and a myriad of other things. Brad and even I went over to carry Thing Two's belongings out of their flooded basement because he was nowhere to be found, and his back was bad anyway, so he couldn't carry the stuff up the basement stairs, according to Thing One. Shortly before Thing Two was thrown out by his wife and moved back into our parents' home in 2010, it was obvious that my dad, who by this time was in his 70s and retired, was getting sick and tired of Thing Two shit and Thing One pissing all of their retirement money on Thing Two and never being paid back. My dad would take my husband or I aside away from my mom and go on and on and on about how she controlled everything he did, and really making it clear that he was getting tired of it. In 27, my dad's older brother passed away and there was no will. He never married, had no children, and had financially supported their younger brother for most of his life. They were just old bachelors. Most would consider them oddballs because they and my dad were orphaned when their dad died and left their mother destitute with 5 kids. So the girls, my dad's sister, ran away, but my dad and his brothers were sent to an institution, too complicated to get into, and stayed there until my dad was 17 and his brothers were both adults. Trying to be a good daughter, I ended up becoming an administrator of my uncle's estate, and my dad and each surviving sibling received $17,000 from the estate. Guess what? Thing One, always in control of the household finances, would not let my dad touch a penny of his inheritance. After this, Thing One called me one day and asked me for my Social Security number. This would have been in 2009, I think. I asked her why she wanted it, and she said she was at the bank and wanted to leave me everything she owned when she died. You see where this is going, right? Now I knew she and my dad had wills, I had seen them years before. The wills were pretty standard, with everything left to the surviving spouse. Then, when they were both gone, everything was to be split 50-50 between Thing 2 and myself. There were no provisions for my half brother or half sister because Thing 1 was so jealous of her and my dad's first wife that they agreed that neither of the half siblings would inherit anything. And she also told me where she kept all of their important papers and where the key to the lockbox was, what banks they used, so I would know what to do when they passed away. They also bought their burial plots, bought the headstone. The only thing left for me or anyone else to do was to show up at their funerals. I thought that I had finally, after 40 years, earned my mother's, yes, I'll use that word here, love and trust, and that's why she was leaving me everything and she and my dad had worked for. That she, that, and because Thing 2 owed so much money and was collecting disability, she and dad were worried that the state would take everything from Thing 2 if they left him anything. Thing 1 and dad also promised me that my husband verbally, and their idea, not ours, that the nice pickup truck that we sold them a couple of years prior would be returned to us in the event anything happened to them, as Thing 1 no longer drove and at 75 was starting to have a difficult time driving. He even backed into a woman who was walking down the street because he did not see her. But what ended up happening set into motion a chain of events that has destroyed my family, ruined our reputation, and put us in actual danger of Thing 1, Thing 2, and their flying monkeys. In January 2011, my dad had a massive stroke, which rendered him totally incapacitated. He was unconscious in the hospital for several days. And when he finally came around, they told us that he had suffered damage to 25% of his brain. He was right-handed and he was paralyzed on his right side, unable to speak or walk. When he asked a question that he would easily have known the answer to and asked to nod or shake his head, he would give the incorrect response. It was obvious that the man who was my dad, who I knew and loved, and as my dad was basically gone, I was devastated, as were my husband, our kids, and 2 grandchildren. It was while my dad was still in the hospital. He was there from January 21st until February 23rd. That the real trouble started. For some bizarre reason, while my dad was still unconscious in the ER, before they even knew for sure what happened to him, my mom stated to my husband and I again that if anything happens to your dad, I want you to have the truck back. I have no idea why she felt the need to say that at the time like that, but I know that she was using it as a way to control us to make sure we stuck by her. After it was figured out that my dad had a massive stroke, Thing 1 really seemed to be falling apart. Her actions seemed pretty in line with someone who was losing their spouse. That was what it seemed like anyway. Thing 2 started talking shit behind Thing 1's back to me, telling me that he thought she was mental. Yada yada. She had a mild stroke around 2006 and was 77 years old. And when Dad had his in 2011, so I too was concerned with some bad behavior I was seeing. But at the same time, she was still talking shit about her to me. He apparently was talking shit about me behind my back to her as well. Now I know that he learned it from her because she is the freaking queen of triangulation and denial. He apparently had her convinced that I was going to put my dad in a nursing home and take everything that she had. Of course, this was in no way, shape, or form true. What I now know that he was trying to do was make sure that he had total control over her, my dad, and everything they owned. And that is what happened. They refused to allow my dad to go to rehab therapy, which of course would be done in a nursing home, but just temporarily. Thing 2 convinced Thing 1 to take my dad home, and the two of them were going to care for him around the clock, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It would be so easy, he said. All they had to do was bathe him, feed him, change his diaper. You get the idea. Keep in mind that this is all coming from this asshole who's collecting disability for being bipolar, which according to Thing 1, he was cured of as if. And having such a bad back that he is taking massive amounts of prescription drugs, hydra, morphine, and God knows what, all along with smoking pot and taking antidepressants, and spends most of his time either in bed or out chasing women. So they get my dad home February 23rd, 2011, and set up in a hospital bed in the back bedroom. Every time I went over there or called and offered to help out, I was told no. They were fine and I were taking care of him. But when I would go over there, I knew something wasn't right. After deciding he didn't need rehab, they started having a handicap bus come pick Thing 1 and my dad and take him to some outpatient rehab place downtown. And I was appalled at how he was treated. They left him laying on a mat in a cold room for at least 40 minutes while they went to help other patients. By the time they got back to my dad, he was moaning in pain and so weak he could do nothing that they tried to get him to do. When he was still in the hospital for a brief time, my dad was able to stand with assistance from the nurses to use the toilet. His right leg started twisting up at the knee, around backwards at the hip, and the hospital did nothing to try to fix it or even address why this is happening to him. By the time he went home in February, he lost complete control of his bowels and bladder and was not even able to sit by himself without being propped up in bed with pillows or strapped into a mobile chair. I went over to the house one morning and Thing 2 was asleep. Thing 1 in the bedroom with my dad, who was laying in bed, his diaper, bedding, clothing, everything soaked with urine. I knew that this had not just happened because everything was soaked. He had to have been left that way for at least the previous night to get that bad. Thing 1 did not want to wake up poor Thing 2. So I helped Thing 1 strip the bed, wash the bedding, and get my dad into a dry diaper and clean clothes. Why didn't you just go kick the motherfucker out of bed? Like, why are you doing all this? Why? What's your motivation in doing all this? I knew what was happening was not right. My dad was getting really, really thin, and I kept telling Thing 1 that something was wrong. Yeah, they're trying to kill him. They want the money. She said, no, nothing was wrong, so he was just losing muscle from being paralyzed and confined to bed. It was during this time that I started catching Thing 1 and Thing 2 doing shady shit and lying to me about stuff. Thing 2 started telling everyone, but not in front of Thing 1, how he was going to inherit everything Thing 1 and my dad had, and how he was going to remodel the house to suit him, and what he was going to do with their cars, etc. I started thinking, what the actual fuck is he talking about? You have to remember that this was a family of secrets, with Thing 1 being at the hub of who got what and making everyone swear not to say anything to anyone else. I confronted Thing 1 and she told me, you know how he is, he just makes stuff up in his own head all of the time, which I could have believed had it not been for things that had happened next. After all the years of pinching pennies, warning me about wasting money on mail order stuff, warning me about Publishers Clearinghouse being a scam, she starts blowing money on shit for Publishers Clearinghouse, saying she wanted to win some of that money. Taking out a reverse mortgage on their house. Stuff that made absolutely no sense based on how she handled finances as far back as I could remember. Stupid ass me thought that Thing 2 was manipulating her. I also found out that in order for Thing 1 to continue to get my dad's pension checks, she had to pay some shyster lawyer who didn't know my dad from Adam and had no contact with Dad and nothing with Thing 1 other than over the phone draw up a power of attorney and send some assistant to the house to have my dad sign it. And this assistant notarized it. I was appalled. I asked Thing 1 what the heck Dad was able to sign anything when how the hell Dad was able to sign anything when his right hand was paralyzed and he was not physically or mentally capable of signing anything. She told me they just stuck the pen in his left hand and told him to make chicken scratches. And this fucking lawyer and assistant went along with this illegal and immoral, irresponsible shit. I also found out that Thing 1 and 2 were using the POA to take out a bunch of $5,000 life insurance policies on my dad, making themselves beneficiaries. I told her that was not legal and that if Dad were wheeled into a courtroom and a judge saw what was going on, that the POA would not stand. To which she screamed at me, "If you tell anyone about it, I'm not going to leave you anything when I die." Thing 1 and my dad's 50th wedding anniversary was coming up in July 2011. She wanted to put on notice the paper about it. I told her I would not help her since I had paid them to have a nice photo session together as an anniversary present about 5 years before because they had no professional photos of the two of them together. At this point, she mentions my half-sister who we had not seen in quite a few years. More complications that I do not want to get into because it's too long. Look, guys, you can't keep putting the parentheses in. You guys got to try to condense these a little bit. You have to. She said she wondered if Sue would see it and contact us. The thing is, I had to contact with Sue several times over the years. She lived so far away that we just couldn't get it together to form a close sisterly relationship. So through some amateur detective work, I was able to track her down and was pleased to know she was glad to hear from me. I told her how ill Dad was and that if she wanted to see him one last time, she better do it soon. So when I went to my dad's house and told him that Thing 1 found out, Thing 1 that had found Sue, she really wanted to come see him, and she lit up like a Christmas tree. Thing 1 did say a word, and I should have known that something really, really bad was about to happen. I went home the next morning and my phone rang. The first thing I hear is, "Why the hell are you inviting anyone over to my house? This is my house. I'm in charge of who's deciding who gets to come over here and who doesn't. If any of you show up over here again, I'm going to have you arrested for trespassing." Oh my God, I'm stunned. She went on and on with the most ridiculous shit and bullshit accusations and screaming like a lunatic that I finally hung up on her. After I hung up, I started getting vile text messages on my cell phone from Thing 2 calling me a fucking lying, backstabbing bitch and other shit, accusing me of never doing anything for Thing 1 and my dad, asking me where I am in the middle of the night when he needs his diaper changed, to which I responded, where the fuck have you been for the last 20 years while Brad and I and the kids did everything for them and he was nowhere around? Then he started texting vile shit to my adult daughter, accusing her of all kinds of bullshit. Of course, I told my half-sister what I was going on, and she didn't want to be in the middle of it. Though she did call Thing One, only to be told a bunch of lies and bullshit about me and my family, and to be verbally abused herself by Thing One. This is when I went no contact the first time, but I was missing my dad so bad and I was so worried about him, but I kept no contact. Then out of the blue, one day, months later, I get a call from Thing One. Now I know she was just trying to suck me back in for more abuse. She wanted to know why I never came to visit them anymore. That Dad really wanted to see me, and all the things she knew would get me to drag me back in. And I fell for it. It was the worst mistake ever. I let myself and my family get sucked back into their insanity. I started catching them in lie after lie. My mom denying it to me in front of my daughter and my husband, and she and my dad ever had a will. That she and my dad ever had a will. Then she changed that and said that they had one, but it was an old one from many decades ago. Then she denied ever promising to give us back the truck. Thing Two was now driving it, and if my dad had known or had been able to do anything, he would have come unglued. No, he wouldn't have. No, he wouldn't have. If he was going to come unglued, he would have never let the motherfucker move back in to begin with. And this is what happens when you try to hang in for the money. Because that's a major part of your motivation here, is the money. You are not going to get the money. You're not. I mean, you're turning your back on insurance fraud because she threatened to cut you out of the will? I'm sorry to tell you this. I have to be honest. You committed a crime. Because you're looking to benefit. Because there's no legal obligation, your mother or your father, that you can be cut out of the will at any time. That's my entire point with it. And now you're saying you have knowledge of them committing insurance fraud with a shiesty lawyer, and you're keeping your mouth shut because your mother threatened to kick you out of the will. Look at the level you went here. I'm nearing the end of the story now. When shit finally hits the fan after catching Thing One and Thing Two in so many lies, but not in front of each other, I decided to catch Thing Two in a lie in front of Thing One to see what would happen. Please understand, I had no clue what narcissism or narcissistic personality disorder was. I never even heard of it. I just always knew that something was very wrong in my family, and something was not right about the relationship between Thing One and Thing Two. I wanted witnesses, so my husband and my adult daughter went to their house, taking my granddaughters with us to visit their papo. So I started questioning Thing One and Two about things they had been saying to me, not in front of each other. I could tell they were getting pissed, and I was getting nervous. Thing Two told me in front of everyone that Thing One never promised him that he would inherit anything, and that he just made it all up. But my gut knew he was lying. I just knew. I decided to leave and was trying to usher my husband out the door with my grandbabies, and was trying to get out the door with my adult daughter. She insisted on saying goodbye to Thing One, and this is where I made the worst mistake. I stepped out on the porch and shut the door, and immediately heard screaming. I started screaming for my husband, who was trying to strap the grandbabies in the car seats, and when I opened the door and stepped in the kitchen, Thing 1 and Thing 2 had my daughter Andrea trapped between the wall and the kitchen. Thing 1, 78 years old, had my daughter by the back of her coat and was violently shaking her back and forth and slammed her into the counter, while Thing 1 was in front of my daughter with his hands raised like he was about to hit her. My daughter was trying to retain her balance to keep from falling, her purse in one hand, the baby's diaper bag in the other. I started screaming when they realized I saw what they were doing. Thing 1 let go of Andrea and ran to the other side of the kitchen island, and Thing 2 did the same on the other side of the island. The first words out of Thing 1's mouth was, "She assaulted him. I am a witness." It was complete and utter bullshit. The only assault going on is what they were doing to my daughter. Prior to Dad's stroke, he had broken a piece of veneer off the edge of the kitchen island. Somehow, Thing 2 ended up scratched by it and had a small scratch on his arm. This lying piece of shit called the police on my daughter, and he and Thing 1 told the police that my daughter assaulted him and she scratched him. It was a damn lie. We waited out in the driveway because we had done nothing wrong and wanted to tell the police our side. They went in and took statements from them and then came out and took our statements. I knew they believed us. The officer told us they had enough of Thing 1 and that we should get a lawyer. Little did I know how badly we were going to need one. Sometimes after we left the house, this lying, manipulative piece of shit motherfucker managed to cause himself multiple bruises all over his legs, and scratched all up and down his arms. There's no way in hell my daughter had the time or the ability to do any of this with him. Even the official police report that my daughter got a copy of after meeting with the detective a couple of weeks later stated that he only had one scratch on his arm and his condition was fine. The responding officers saw no other injuries, and he did not complain about it. Yet, when a detective went to interview him, he was now covered in bruises and bloody scratches. The war had been declared. The county attorney's office believed every fucking lie that Thing 1 and 2 told them because he had proof of his injuries. We did not have any money to hire a lawyer, so my daughter was given choice before a judge with no lawyer. When we knew that these assholes would show up with a lawyer they could afford, or my daughter could agree to take one day assaultive behavior class and nothing would go on her record. We tried to explain to this bitch from the county attorney's office what the truth was, and she would not even look up at us or acknowledge that what we were trying to tell her. She told us that in this state you have no legal right to defend yourself, a lie, and that this was not like any case down in Florida, referencing Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman case, and that this state has no stand your ground law. We're trying to tell her our daughter was the victim, and she changed her story and said that in this state you can only defend yourself with your bare hands, and only if attacked as a weapon and you are cornered. Otherwise you must retreat, which is another lie. We told this bitch that Thing 1 and 2 did have her trapped between the wall and the kitchen, and that Thing 1 had a hold of her from behind and Thing 2 was in front of her. She was cornered. This woman absolutely refused to listen to us, period. So my daughter accepted the deal and did her one-day assaultive behavior class. Well, what happened to cause the fight? Well, that's all that Thing 1 and Thing 2 needed to come unglued on us. During all this, my husband had a change of jobs and we were ready to relocate an hour away. But Thing 2 could just not help himself. He started up with vile texts again, tormenting us, how funny it was that Andrea had to go to this assaultive behavior class and on and on. I had enough of their shit. Where are the text messages? Do you have the text messages? Print them out. Find somebody. I started filing complaints and turning them into every agency that I could think of. I turned them into our state insurance commission for life insurance fraud, Guess what? I got treated like an idiot because according to them, since Thing 1 and 2 canceled the policies after I found out about them and did not try to collect, there is no fraud committed. But I have every reason to believe that after they got us out of the picture, they just got some other schmuck at some other agency to make out new policies, naming themselves beneficiaries. I reported them to Adult Protective Services, the police, the Social Security Administration for fraud since Thing 1 was financially supporting him, and I know was not reporting it to them. I filed complaints with everyone I could think of. Nothing was done. Nothing. Then Andrea and I made a trip to the courthouse. We tried to get a restraining order and a no-contact order against them to stop their harassment, and were told by the judge it was impossible since we did not live in the same house with them, or, get this, have children or a sexual relationship with Thing 2. Our next trip was our last chance to get him to stop. So you're just telling me he's allowed to keep sending me text messages? The police, I mean, it's the police. At some point, the police have to charge him. We went before a judge and had filed a complaint to have him picked up and detained in a mental facility for an evaluation. The judge approved it. Not only did she approve it after hearing about Thing 2's lifelong mental instability, but she said I should have filed to have Thing 1 and 2 evaluated if she is 78 years old and assaulting her own grandchild and allowing a felon to live in the home and care for a disabled and dependent adult. We did not go that far, but Thing 2 was picked up by the police and taken to a mental health facility where he stayed until Wednesday, July 18th, when he would have a hearing. He would be represented by a court-appointed attorney, and so would my daughter and I. But my husband and I moved an hour away during the weekend, and when my daughter's court-appointed attorney called both of us separately, he treated us like shit. He acted like we were wasting his time and was condescending as hell. I asked him what was going to happen if the judge decided to let him leave after the hearing, and the attorney said he could just walk right out of there. I was scared shitless, so was my daughter. All I could think of was having his criminal friends waiting outside, and Andrea and I being attacked. So neither of us went to the hearing, and he was allowed to leave. That was it until September 2013. You know, what criminal friends? He has to live with his mother. And he has to live with his mother. I mean, I still don't understand, don't know what the story, how it became physical to begin with. I am on page 15, and I'm still, that's the problem. I don't know, like, you're telling me the lawyer's acting like you're wasting that. I don't know what the story is. I hope I find out. I did not even know that my dad had died until he was dead and buried for a month. Something weird happened that prompted me to do a search online. Everything Thing 2 did to us and to my daughter, he showed up where he used to work with a box of family photos, most of them containing my daughter, myself, husband, our kids, and grandkids. They told him she was no longer there and wanted him to leave the box with them and tell her it's her grandma. She was so upset when she opened it and saw the pictures. She said she felt like Thing 1 was trying to erase us from their life. In reality, that's what she was doing. Of course that's what she's doing. I mean, why are you surprised by that now? The discard had begun. The discard had begun? Are you serious? The discard had begun years ago. So I searched online, and there was an obituary for my dad. I felt gutted. I got hysterical. I called my daughter, and she just fell apart. I'll provide a link to the obit when you see it. It just screams narc. They made sure their names were in front and center, and how they took care of my dad right until he died. They did not put my name, my half-brother, or my sister's name, my dad's last surviving sister's name. Just their names. It was horrible, but the torture of us still was not finished. I wrote a short note, sent it certified mail, with the return receipt, just asking thing one why she had not contacted us, that dad had died. Though I knew the answer in my heart, it was to stick the knife as far as possible and twist it. The very day she signed the letter, she called my cell phone because she still had the number. I was not prepared, even after everything they had already done, for the vile, hateful, venomous filth that spilled from her disgusting mouth over the phone to me. She insulted me, accused me of all kinds of shit that I had never done, shit that she and Thing One were actually guilty of. She called me a liar, told me I was sick, insane, and needed to be locked up. She told me she was my ex-mother and that she had destroyed every picture she had had of me way back when I was a baby, my birthdays, weddings, pictures, everything. She told me that I was not getting a damn thing when she died, and to add insult to injury, actually had the gall to accuse me of borrowing money from her that I never paid back, another bold-faced lie, and to consider that my inheritance because it was the only thing that I was going to get. In between her ranting, unloaded on her about Thing Two, reminding her of all the shit he had done over the years, about how he was a criminal, to which she says, I don't know what he does, and I don't care. It's none of my business what he does. Even though she did, because she's always behind it, backing him up, bailing him out, and covering up for him every time, and again for decades. I finally hung up on her when she was shrieking incoherently on the phone. I had enough of it. That was the final contact that any of us had had with either of them, September 2013. And of course, we had been targets of the typical smear campaign. A couple of people know better than to believe it, but there are others who don't know the truth and have taken their word for gospel and sided with them, which really hurts. We heard from at least one person that Thing Two's story about what happened in the kitchen that day had now changed. Now he was rescuing Thing One because my daughter was beating on her and got scratched trying to jump in between my daughter and Thing One to stop her beating on her. Complete and total bullshit, playing the victim yet again. Again, what started it? What happened? Did they just jump on your daughter for no reason? What's the story? So now at the present, and why? Why just attack your daughter out of that? Like, what is the story? If everything was fine and everything, I don't understand where this attack came from. Or what the story is. There's like something missing here. So now at present, I have found out that all the smearing us on Facebook to anyone who will listen. And he has supporters, including Dave, who he accused behind his back of being a thief and a child rapist. I have printed copies of all this shit, but you can go and look at his Facebook page because it is not private. He also displays his paranoia, accusing his ex-wife's father cutting the brake lines on his car and trying to kill him, saying that if he ends up dead, his ex-wife Brandy and his son Cody did it, claiming that the police tried to kill him at the jail when he was arrested for trying to run over his girlfriend with the car. You will read that on Facebook too if he hasn't changed or deleted it since I last looked. And now, here is why I am afraid that our lives are in danger. This twisted, paranoid, delusional, lying psycho has been online trying to buy guns from sellers in other states. He can't buy guns online. He's a felon. He can't. He can't buy guns. I tried to put this out of my mind and tried to get counseling to deal with this. I tried several different counselors and they all say totally clueless. He can't pass a background check if he's a felon. It's illegal for him to try to buy a gun. So if you have proof of him trying to buy a weapon and he's a felon, okay, that's a slam dunk for the police. I decided to do a genealogy on our family recently, and when I put in my dad's name since thing 2 as a junior, stuff popped up on Google about him. He's been busy between slander and character assassination. He's now trying to buy weapons. This poor disabled baby who only gets $600 a month on SSDI, who went on TV holding a cane trying to get sympathy because his pain clinic closed, and his doctor was arrested, even though I've never seen in my life him use a cane or even limp. Now has thousands of dollars to spend on guns, a speedboat, trailer, a new car, etc. No one can stop him from buying weapons because even though he has a record, he was locked up involuntarily, and he was locked up involuntarily for a psychiatric evaluation. He has not been declared mentally incompetent, has not spent a day in prison for a felony, only been charged with a felony. He is one of those lunatics who has slipped between the cracks. Now this paranoid lunatic does not hunt and has no reason to be buying guns. I am so scared now that thing 1, being in her 80s and facing her mortality rate, might be goading him into killing us or having someone else do it. I know for a fact they have slandered us to everyone they know, and thing 2 has been involved with some really shady characters, other criminals over the years who could easily be manipulated with promises of money, etc. What the hell do I do? No one will listen. No one will take it seriously. No one. I am so isolated in this new community. I have been here 4 years, and I have not made one friend because I do not trust people, and I do not trust my own judgment of people anymore. If my own blood could do this to me for so long, and I was blind to it. There's so much more that I could tell you. So much left out that proves what these two are. But like I said in the beginning of this letter, it would make a book. And we were supposed to sit around and wait for him to flip out or send someone else to our doors and put a bullet in us. My dad is Marvin Hammernick Sr. Thing 2 is Marvin Hammernick Jr. If you Google him, Hammernick. If you Google it, you will find him on Facebook, Twitter, the thing about guns, etc. Here is a link to our court system. It's free to use, and all you have to do is click Start a Case Search here, click Case Search under the trial court heading. Thank you, and God bless you and your wife for all the good that you do. Sherry, I'm not sure how much of that you wanted on or how much you don't, but in 18 pages, I still don't know what started, what it was, what was about that moment, about this case, why everybody's running away from it. I understand that your mother said she attacked him, but why? What's the why behind it? Without the why, I can't give you an answer. You gave me all this back history of your story, and it's definitely narcissism, everything you're saying. But this is an hour and 13 minutes, and I still have no idea what is the story. I can tell you this. Your brother is completely full of fucking shit. He's not buying guns, okay? I guarantee you he's unable to buy a gun. He hasn't slipped through the cracks. You have said yourself time and time and time and time and time again how many fucking lies you catch these people in over these 18 pages you've written. They are full of shit. They're not doing anything. Look, you're upset you got cut out of the will, rightfully so, based on what it was. But you're making a deal with the devil. You're making a deal with the devil. And this is what happens. I have to be very honest with you. I mean, I just if the case is in this link and the detail, but it's not going to tell me the he said she said. I don't know. I don't know. I I just don't understand, based on what you're telling me and his history, how he gets past all this. I don't understand it. But if you're inferior life, and I don't think you have anything to fear from this guy. I mean, if he was going to, I understand that this fight happened in the kitchen, okay? But if he doesn't have the balls to keep hitting you in front of, hitting the daughter or whatever was going on with you and the daughter, he doesn't have the balls to kill anybody. He don't. Not physically. I um I don't think I've ever really. I'm not saying I've never really felt like this at the end of a video, and I'm not saying I don't believe you. I absolutely believe you. I absolutely do. But you brought a lot of this on yourself by hanging in for the money. You knew who these people were. You knew what your brother was. You're letting your father off the hook for allowing him to continue to come back into the house. You understand. You've read up on narcissism and understand it enough to understand what you went through. But you had your brother locked up, and he didn't show up because of some criminal friends. So if you didn't show up in 2013 because of criminal friends out of fear of your life, and now you're saying now you're in fear of your life because now he's searching guns, but you didn't show up in 2013 because of this. There's nothing here. I just don't. There's nothing here as far as where I think he's going to do anything to anybody. I just don't know. I just don't know. I mean, this has just been a hell of a first video to come back to, but you know, I just wish I had what exactly your daughter said happened and what they were saying happened and the why. I don't understand the why, what led up to it, who said what to who and why. Did they just jump on her? Without any of that, I don't know, you know, what the story is. Like what the story is. I know you're saying he scratched himself and that's how he got the scratch. Okay, but what initially started? Like where did it go? What was that? That's what I don't understand, and that's what I don't know. But as far as him being some kind of killer over 78, no. If she cut you out of the will, what does he have? What motivation does he have to kill you at this point? Or your family member? What would be the point? Unless you're still trying to fight to get the money. If that's what if that's what you're saying, and I don't know if you walked away from it, because you did say that at the beginning with thank you for your contribution. I do appreciate it. But you said y'all understand why your contribution was what it was at the end. And is that because that you're still trying to get this money and you're depending on that money, and if your mother's still alive, I just don't understand. So, I mean, I'm really sorry for the abuse you went through. I really am. I really am. I mean, there's just a lot of unanswered questions. Well, not, it's just that one. And okay, I got to wrap it up here. I almost want to apologize because this video threw me off, but I mean, I kind of got to post it because it's been an hour and 20 minutes. To Sherry, I honestly don't believe you would be in any type of risk. If you bring those text messages to the police station, what you have and what he sent you, I would confirm whether or not he's been convicted of anything, whether or not he can actually buy guns, but what's the motivation? What's his motivation is my question, to kill you. If your mother's cutting you out of the will, then what's the point? Unless you're fighting it, I mean, would that be a motivation? But he still wouldn't have the balls to do anything. If you're worried for your life and you are still trying to get the will, give it up. Walk away from it. Is it about the money? Is it about the money? Or is it about your lives? Okay, you already made that mistake when they were filling out false insurance policy and your mother threatened to cut you out of the will and you kept your mouth shut. You have to make sure what your priority is when you're going no contact from a narcissist. What are your real motivations is what you got to ask yourself. But do I think this guy is going to come because he's looking at guns and he's puffing his chest and trolling on social media? I doubt that. I doubt that. So thank you so much for your contribution. Thank you for your story. I'm sorry it came out like this at the end. It's not that I don't believe you. I absolutely do. It's just I wish I knew with a video this long what exactly happened in that kitchen. So thank you to everybody watching. Please leave any opinions or advice in the comment section below. And again, if you want your story read on the channel, you have a narcissist you'd like to expose, a topic you'd like me to cover, you know what to do with the PayPal in the description and my email links in the description box. I'll have the video right back to you. This is Ollie Matthews. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all again soon.